Vikram Sampath's latest book delves into one of the most controversial Indian historical figures, Tipu Sultan, the ruler of Mysore from 1782 to 1799. Known as the Tiger of Mysore, Tipu's legacy remains fiercely debated. To some, he's a symbol of resistance against British colonialism and a visionary ruler who sought to modernize his kingdom. To others, he's remembered for religious intolerance, forced conversions, and destruction. Through this meticulously researched book, Vikram Sampath has examined multiple layers of Tipu's life, his policies and battles, challenging established narratives and offering fresh insights from into Tipu Sultan's historical significance. Vikram Sampath is right here in the studio. Vikram Sampath, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Maria. Always a pleasure to talk to you and in this beautiful new studio of yours.
Thank you so much. From Veer Savarkar to Tipu Sultan, what made you get into, or should I say, make Tipu Sultan a subject of your interest and your book?
Well, in a very, very perverse manner, I think I owe my entire entry into writing, into historiography and interest in history to Tipu Sultan. When I was 12 or 13 years old, there was this Sword of Tipu Sultan serial that was on Doordarshan, where Sanjay Khan played the lead role. And for those of your viewers who may remember, the Mysore royal family of the Wadiyars was shown in a very poor light in that serial. The Maharaja was shown like this obese retard who was dancing with the court dancer. The Maharani, one of those typical vamps who was always conspiring and conniving against Tipu. And about that portrayal, there was a lot of unrest and protests in various parts of Karnataka, the state I come from, where the Wadiyars are still held in a lot of regard and reverence by people. Now, I was a 12 or 13-year-old boy then, looking at all of this. There were all kinds of stories doing the rounds in media. If you remember, the studio caught fire and Sanjay Khan's face too got burnt in the process. And a lot of Kannada media were saying that this is the curse of the Wadiyar for what he had done to them. So as a young boy seeing this, I don't know what stirred inside me that I decided then to make it an object of discovery for me. Never with the intention to write a book or become a historian in the process, but it was a self-motivated, self-initiated, more importantly, self-funded project then to go to Mysore, meet members of the royal family, archivists, historians, old-timers to gather information initially about only just that one king and queen who were shown badly in the serial. Soon the interest graduated to the entire dynasty of the Wadiyars, who ruled for 600 long years, one of the longest reigning royal houses of India from 1399 to 1947. And in the middle, there was this 40-year period called the Interregnum, or the intermission, an interval when a regular government is overthrown and a usurpation happens. In this case, Tipu's father, Hyder Ali, who usurped the kingdom from the Wadiyars. Now, these 40 years were I think a revolutionary, era in both the history of Mysore as well as in the history of India. So I think it was very important to revisit this era, and more so when, as you mentioned rightly, Tipu is so weaponized by contemporary politics, and both sides, for and against, appropriate him. Either they valorize him, eulogize him, or demonize him, just as probably what Veer Savarkar also gets boxed into these political camps. In such a scenario, I feel, Maria, that it's the responsibility, or should I say burden, of a historian to actually lay bare the facts and state them on record.
Okay, so in your research, how did you approach reconciling Tipu Sultan's dual image? As a freedom fighter against British colonialism and also as a ruler who has been accused of religious persecution?
See, first of all, I wouldn't even call him a freedom fighter because there are the same set of people who call him that also say that there was nothing called a nation and India became a nation only after the British integrated us. Nationalism is almost a cuss word, for that section of people. But the same people also say he fought for the freedom of India, which, he fought the British just as he fought the Nizam, the Marathas and others. The British were just yet another player in the large chessboard of political chaos that 18th century India was. He fought for himself, his honor, his kingdom and so on. There was no idea that he was liberating India from the British, because when you say freedom fighter, he was actually taking the help of the French to fight the British. And the French were no less imperialist and colonial than the British. And if by some stroke of luck, Tipu had won, India would have probably become a French colony. But nonetheless, he was a very brave soldier, someone who modernized Mysore's army, established a navy, the rockets that he improvised on, all of that is there. But to stretch it to the idea of him being the first freedom fighter, etc., that is a little bit of a stretch.
Should we then reframe the discourse to focus more on his role in anti-colonial struggles?
Yes, maybe, because anti-colonial struggle by taking the support of another colonial power, which, whether you understood what colonialism really is, I'm doubtful. That era, I don't think any other Indian ruler also understood this too well. And he was writing letters to Zaman Shah of Persia, to the Ottoman Caliph, to the Turkey Sultan, all of these people appealing to the faith-based kind of allegiance there to invade India, to turn it into an Islamic caliphate. So if, as I said, if he had won by some stroke of luck, either India would have become a French colony or an Islamic, republic in future, centuries. So while I underscore this again and again, that there is no two ways, that he hated the British viscerally. Until his last breath, he fought them. But let's not stretch definitions to actually make him sound like the first freedom fighter of India.
Okay, so if he is not a hero, then Tipu Sultan is often accused of forcibly converting Hindus and Christians.
Yeah.
So as per your research, what does it reveal about the extent and motivations behind these actions? Were they driven by religious zeal, political strategy, or would you say a mix of both?
Yeah. No, again, this hero-villain binary, I never put to characters. Someone like Tipu Sultan is a historian's enigma. I think he defies straitjacket definitions of black and white. There are more than 50 shades of grey when it comes to someone like this. There is no doubt, again, in the fact that his faith mattered a lot to him. And here there is no scope for ambiguity at all, because he writes in his own letters, his own dream registers where he records this, his unbridled hatred for what he calls as the unbelievers, the infidels, the kafirs, and including his manifesto of his Sarkar-e-Khudadad, the Islamization of a Hindu kingdom of Mysore, where the name was changed, Persian replacing Kannada and Marathi as the court language to maintain accounts. Places Islamized, Mysore becomes Nazarabad, Coorg becomes Zafarabad, Mangalore becomes Islamabad, all these names which he gave to the Sultanate that he wanted to create, where the manifesto very clearly says that the entire objective of the Sultanate is to annihilate the Kafirs. So there's no scope for misinterpretation or ambiguity. The famous sword of Tipu Sultan also has on it an inscription which says this is to establish the true faith and to drench itself in the blood of the Kafirs. And in his own reports, his letters, what the commanders write to him, there is graphic, gory detail of the kind of atrocities heaped on numerous communities. You had the Mandya Mayangars within Mysore, you had the Kodavas in Coorg, you had the Christians, the Mangalore Christians in the Kannada region of Karnataka, and the Nayars and the Thiyas communities in Malabar in Kerala. One might argue that this was a pre-modern era, so violence was so intrinsically linked with kingship. All kings were violent those days, wars were bloody. Even today, we see the conflict in the Middle East or Russia, Ukraine. Civilians become collateral damage in all of these wars. So that is for sure. But some people were more cruel than the others, were probably more barbaric than the rest. And this cruelty and barbarism being driven by a theological basis, I think that we see undoubtedly in the case of Tipu Sultan, and there are no two ways about it.
So will he be seen then as a pragmatic ruler?
Not really. I would actually rate his father, Hyder Ali, as a much more pragmatic and a statesman kind of a person who was Machiavellian, from rags to riches. In just 12 years of him coming to the firmament of Mysore, he manages to overthrow the throne of his own benefactor, the Vadiyar, who had actually taken pity on him as a young boy and paid off the debts that his father owed to someone and had died, and actually enlists Hyder and his brother Shahbaz into the Mysorean army. So in 12 years, running with the hare, hunting with the hounds, turning every rule in the book on its head, Hyder manages to usurp the kingdom and become its dictator. Now, this entire kingdom which the father builds is given to Tipu on a platter. He didn't have to work hard for it. but the kind of arrogance, the hubris, the megalomania, so to say, and this highly self-bloated image about himself that I can do no wrong, comparing himself to sometimes even the Holy Prophet, these kind of things literally, I think, was his nemesis. So strategy was somewhere really missing, and Hyder himself in the book I mentioned, Maria, that time and time again Hyder bemoans the fact that I have built a kingdom with so much of hard work and toil. My son, who doesn't have the far-sightedness, is going to squander it all away. So, and in a very perverse manner, his prediction came true. In just 17 years that he ruled, Tipu, started his innings on a very high note. He concluded the Second Anglo-Mysore War, which his father had begun, in a fantastic manner. The Treaty of Mangalore that he signed with the British, I think it was the last document where an Indian power had an upper hand. Then he vanquished the Kodavas, the Nayars in Malabar. He also managed to defeat the Marathas in 1787. But after that, you see a steady decline of the person. 2 Mysore wars that he fought independently himself without his father's support, he lost horribly. In the 3rd Anglo-Mysore War, he lost half his kingdom. He had to give about 3.5 crores as war indemnity to the British, for which 2 of his sons, Abdul Khalik and Muizuddin, were also given away as hostages. And in the last and final Anglo-Mysore War in 1799, the British literally encircle the fort of Srirangapatna, and he's killed in battle.
Okay, then how do you compare Tipu Sultan's religious policies with those of other contemporary rulers such as Marathas, Mughals or the British? Was he an exception, or were his actions reflective of the era's geopolitical realities?
Yeah, I mean, even forget the other powers, even between father and son, you spoke about the grants to temples and so on. Most of these grants, as I was to discover in the course of my research, were actually those that were instituted by Hyder. Very few of them actually come during Tipu's reign. There is no doubt that father and son actually held the Shankaracharya of Sringeri in very high regard, and they used to keep writing letters to him and so on, which again I have documented. Now, a lot is made of Tipu's grants to especially Sringeri at a very difficult time, when in the 3rd Anglo-Mysore War, when the Marathas invade Mysore, some of the irregulars in the Maratha army, the Pindaris, they go and loot the Sringeri Mutt. They vandalize the idol of goddess Sharda Devi also there, and the Shankaracharya is so incensed that he goes on a fast unto death. And this actually sends tremors back to Pune. And the Peshwa sends so many letters of apology to the Shankaracharya, asking him to call off the fast, because had he died, I think they felt that the Peshwa empire would have a huge, negative backlash. At that time, Tipu writes to the Shankaracharya saying, don't take money from the Peshwa, I will give the money to resurrect the Mutt. It was realpolitik also playing in. And in return, very interestingly, he asks the Shankaracharya to pray for his long life and his victory against the Marathas, which the Shankaracharya actually does. He does a Shata Chandi Havan and a Sahasra Chandi Homa and all these things. But actually 1 year after the establishment of the Mutt, re-establishment and renovation due to Tipu's munificence, the Shankaracharya actually is a state guest at Pune. He goes all the way. He receives the Peshwa's warm welcome. So ideally, it was not part of the state policy of the Marathas to go and invade or destroy Sringeri. It was an accident that happened, a very shameful episode. But a lot is made about that. And as I said, Hyder actually, understood that this was a Hindu majority kingdom, and he knew that he had usurped the kingdom of his own benefactor, and the people would not like it. So he was quite, magnanimous when it came to religious policy. He allowed temples to function. Even the Dutch records mention that he banned cow slaughter and bull slaughter and all that in Mysore, because they were considered sacred for the Hindu community. Even several eyewitness accounts. There's a German missionary called Schwartz who comes to Mysore during Hyder's time. He also accounts that this man doesn't care so much about his faith. He allows people to do, as long as he has his power, as long as he's able to exercise his power, he really doesn't mind who does what they pursue as their faith. But the religious, angle or the bigotry that was there, it is very, very evident in Tipu Sultan right from a very young age. While his father had stopped cow slaughter, bull slaughter, as a young boy, he would go and hunt these down, for which the father would give him the strictest of punishments.
Then what was guiding Tipu Sultan when he was actually going against the values of his father?
Yeah, I think so. The Hyder, because of his very difficult childhood, he never had education in his life. He was and that's the whole irony. Someone who was so well educated like Tipu, education doesn't actually translate to strategy and forward-looking mind, because he squandered it despite his education. But Hyder, being illiterate, he put him under the tutelage of some Maulvi who was to teach him. But 2-3 years later, he just conducts a mock examination of the son. And Hyder is supposedly aghast at what he hears from the son, and he dismisses that Maulvi and even admonishes his son, saying if he learns all these religious bigotry at this young age, he will grow up to become a good mullah but not a great ruler. He needs to learn the art of kingship, of warfare, of statecraft, of diplomacy, which he's not learning. So I think very early the fact that the father was not there to guide the son, he got led into this whole idea of faith-based supremacy that he always followed.
And Vikram, we historians haven't really spoken much about Hyder as a ruler. He often figures as Tipu Sultan's father. Why do you think history has been unfair to him?
I agree. I mean, in my writing, my research, though, I mean, he was cruel, no doubt, as cruel in his conquests, ruthless in his, way of dealing with people, vindictive, all that is there. And the kingship being linked to violence, you see it in the rubric of his life. But at the same time, he was also one of the bravest, people of his times. If the British actually lost in any war, it was the first two Anglo-Mysore wars under Hyder. In the first Anglo-Mysore war, he goes to the very gates of Madras, to the Fort St. George, and British power could have been exterminated from India at that point. And in the second Anglo-Mysore war too, the Battle of Polilur, where both father and son together, they defeat Colonel Bailey. Sir Hector Munro, who's the hero of the battles of Buxar and Plassey and had defeated so many Nawabs, the Nawab of Awadh, of Bengal, the Mughal, he actually throws away all his arms and ammunitions into a tank in Kanchipuram and runs away to Madras to save his life. And the stories of Hyder's victory, they sent shockwaves all the way to London. It was discussed in the Parliament in Britain. The East India Company's stock price started plummeting because of that. And so if anybody actually can be called a brave soldier who actually won wars against the British and destroyed the myth of the infallibility of European powers, it was Hyder Ali. And it's very sad that he is not celebrated, because probably he didn't die in battle, as a martyr that way. He had back cancer and he died in the war camp, but not in the war, fighting.
On the battlefield. On the battlefield. There is another aspect of Tipu Sultan, which is about his reforms and governance, which is often spoken about.
Yeah.
So I want you to help us understand. He's often credited with significant administrative and economic reforms. How transformative were those reforms vis-a-vis Mysore, and how do they compare with other governance models in other Indian states of that time?
Yeah. So on several fronts, like, he increased the cultivable land in Mysore, was very peasant friendly, where, he gave interest-free loans for, peasants to cultivate. Some of it also with the ulterior motive that, you cough up your more revenue and funds, because a lot of it had to go, especially, as I said, after the third Mysore war, to pay the war indemnity, for which even grants from temples were actually confiscated. But, the administration itself, and more so the army, and this whole rocket technology, people, wrongly ascribe him as the father of missiles, which is a little bit, again, of a stretch.
But military innovations is often spoken about. So, and some degree of advancements.
Advancement, sure.
Yes.
He was a restless mind. I think he was so taken in by science and technology. In his free time, he always wanted to know how a thermometer works, or a barometer, microscope, get all these from his emissaries he sent abroad and try to see what to do about it. These rockets too, initially it used to be having a casing which was made of wood or paper. Now, father and son, and the son more, replaced it with iron. Now, iron in India those days was probably the world's most superior iron that we had. And so this casing that was there actually helped to pack the propellant inside that casing, and so the thrust of the rocket and also the range that it could hit was so vast, and so that's why crushing defeats were inflicted on the Marathas and British and so on because of this. And he created a market for Mysorean products abroad. betel nut, sandalwood, ivory, pearls, many other things that Mysore was famous for, found markets in Muscat, in Oman, in Bahrain, and even in France, where he sent
Yes.
emissaries to.
So that brings me to my next question. Was Tipu's attempt to create alliances with France and the Ottoman Empire a sign of his global outlook, or was it a desperate strategy against the British?
A little bit of both. But I would credit him with the fact that he understood global geopolitics much better than several of his contemporaries. Now, most Indian powers were negotiating with either the British in Madras and the French in Pondicherry. Now, when it came to executing these treaties, they would put their hands down and say the emperor in England or France should ratify it. So he said, why deal with these, middlemen? I'll directly deal with the supreme power by sending emissaries all the way to Louis XVI in France at a wrong time when the French Revolution was brewing there, and Louis XVI himself was beheaded and Marie Antoinette was executed. But still, the vision to send an emissary there was something that he understood much better than his contemporaries. You have letters between him and Napoleon Bonaparte, where Napoleon promises help to come and help him. It was a bit of both. So to the French, he appealed to their rivalry against the British and sought for help. With all the other, the larger Muslim Brotherhood that was there, he appealed to them on being a co-religionist. And there he kind of gloats on the crimes he commits, saying, I am the true Islamic ruler of India. I have killed so many Kafirs, Hindus and Christians. I have broken so many temples and churches and so on. And so declare me as the Badshah, because the Mughal was such a weakling by then, Shah Alam, between Palam, narrow stretch, that was all was the
Mughal Empire.
Mughal Empire, and he was under the control of Mahji Scindia. So he appealed to them saying, I am the true, power, and so you invade India and I will help you in establishing what I mentioned earlier, an Islamic caliphate in the whole of the subcontinent.
Okay, then to what extent did Tipu's failure to unite with Indian powers like the Marathas or the Nizam contribute to his eventual defeat by the British?
Yeah, in the first two Mysore wars, Hyder had forged alliances with the Marathas and the Nizam too. The Nizam was a very irresponsible ally. He would suddenly, in the middle of the war, he would back off. But so were the Marathas. In the second Anglo-Mysore war, it is Nana Fadnavis, the statesman, who actually brings out this whole idea of a pan-Indian alliance to oust the British. And he calls Hyder and the Nizam and brings them onto one, forum to launch the second Anglo-Mysore war. But midway in the war, the Marathas walk out. And Hyder is quite, aghast by this. He said, I took on the British, though I have no enmity with them, on the advice of the Marathas, and they have let me down now. How can anyone, trust these people? But in the two wars that followed, I think Tipu never made alliances with anyone. Nobody trusted him, both outside the kingdom and also later in his life within the kingdom. He started losing people's confidence. And so by the time of the last Anglo-Mysore war, he had no confidant, be it Hindu or even Muslim. Some of his traitors were people like Mir Sadiq, who was his prime minister, and Mir Nadim, who was the Kiledar. When the British were at the gates of Srirangapatna, when he was advised to run away through a secret passage, which he was considering as an option, at the last minute, Mir Sadiq got that water gate closed so that he could not run away. There was another gate which was available to escape, which Mir Nadim, the Kiledar, blocked it off. And all the Mysorean soldiers, at the peak of the war, when there's a breach in the fort and the British were trying to enter in, the Mysore soldiers were all locked up in a room on the pretext of paying them salaries. And so there was not a single soul left at that time to defend the fort and the kingdom. And it's almost like a Greek tragedy, Maria, where chapter by chapter by chapter, you see this man's downfall. But a lot of it is something that he brought upon himself because of, as I said, hubris, losing people's confidence. I think you need to take people along, which Hyder knew how to do. And that is what statecraft is all about. His dream registers, I actually got an original copy of that in the British Library in London, where every day he used to have very vivid dreams. And every morning he would actually sit in his toilet for 2 hours and note down all these dreams. Now, those dreams, actually, I got them psychoanalyzed with a psychiatrist because, dreams are the index of your subconscious mind. And the outcome was, it was of a person who was deeply insecure and also almost consumed by hatred and toxicity. Every dream is so violent, so full of bloodshed. Suddenly, the Holy Prophet appears or some angel appears and asks him to go a little far and break a temple or destroy a church. His Marathas are shown as effeminate characters. The Nizam or the Travancore ruler is shown as evil people whom he is divinely being guided to destroy. So I think he started depending, the psychopathy within him, I think he started depending on so many unreal things rather than make strategic alliances or diplomatic decisions, which could have saved him, just as his father had actually built an entire empire through statecraft, a lot of deceit and cunningness too, but he had the vision which sadly the son did not have.
Moving away from Tipu to now Vikram Sampath.
Oh my God.
Yes, this book and this conversation was absolutely fascinating, Vikram. The sheer spectrum of your writing shows the colors of the rainbow. I mean, it's really great that you can delve into so many characters and so many subjects interest you. What now?
Right now, of course, there are several books in my head, Maria, but I have actually started a new organization called the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, FIHCR, largely with the support of Bhavesh Agarwal, the Ola Foundation. And our idea here is to foster new scholarship in Indian history. One that is fact-based, that is based on documentation, no retrofitting of facts to suit today's ideologies and political correctness. Go back to the primary sources. So we've instituted a fellowship in the name of Sir Jadunath Sarkar, the famous historian, and actually giving out scholarships to new scholars to write with the ask that at the end of it, you come out with a publish-worthy manuscript.
Thank you so much for your time. So viewers, this is the book of historian Vikram Sampath. I've managed to read a few chapters. I plan to finish it very soon, but certainly it promises to be an interesting read. So do go and catch your copy.